Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Thomas and Friends in 5. Today's episode will feature none other than Thomas the Tank Engine himself. We have a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. Thomas is one of the anthropomorphic locomotive characters in the Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends universe. Anthropomorphic refers to non-human things like objects or animals that have human characteristics. Despite Thomas being the main character in the Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends universe, he actually didn't make his first appearance in the literature until the second book in the Railway series titled Thomas the Tank Engine, written by Wilbert Awdry and published in September 1946. Thomas's coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, are featured in the book as well. And in case you're wondering who was in the first book of the Railway series, it was Edward, Gordon, and Henry. Thomas runs on the Northwestern Railway, or NWR for short, located on the fictitious island of Sodor, which is located in the very non-fictitious United Kingdom. Specifically, he runs on the Farquhar branch line, otherwise known as Thomas's branch line. His livery is the NWR cerulean blue with red pinstriping or lining, and a yellow number 1 also outlined in that red pinstriping. When Thomas first arrived on Sodor, however, his livery was a jade green with white pinstriping. That livery also included the number 70 and the letters LBSC. Both the numbers and letters were painted in yellow with red pinstriping. LBSC is an acronym for the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railway, though LB and SCR is another common acronym for the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railway. Thomas's primary job on the NWR is almost exclusively hauling the express passenger coaches Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas is also part of a group of steam locomotives known as the Steam Team. The Steam Team core members are based at the Tidmouth Sheds and include Gordon, Henry, Edward, James, Percy, and Thomas. Some sources also include Toby and Emily in the Steam Team, though they were based in different sheds. Thomas began his career on Sodor as a station pilot in Knapford. A station pilot is essentially a locomotive dedicated to moving empty coaches in and out of the station platforms. Thomas wanted to get out of shunting work, however, so he tried his hand at hauling goods trucks, but they were, troublesome. But Thomas continued to work hard. At one point, Thomas helped rescue James after an accident, and the Fat Controller rewarded Thomas by giving him his own branch line hauling Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas's best friend on the NWR is the saddle tank named Percy. Now there's a lot more to Thomas's journey and his many adventures, but that should get you started. Personality-wise, Thomas is considered to be a cheeky engine. Cheeky just means bold or brash, maybe rude or disrespectful, but in a playful sort of way. In general, Thomas is an optimistic, cheerful, and kind-hearted locomotive who prides himself on being very helpful almost to a fault, getting himself in over his head on occasion. He's also a very popular locomotive. With all those wonderful traits, it's no wonder Thomas wears the number 1 and is the undisputed star of the franchise. Thomas is an 060 tank locomotive, which means he's fueled by coal and water stored on board the locomotive itself and not hauled in a separate piece of rolling stock pulled behind the locomotive called a tender. The numbers 060 refers to the White Notation, which is a wheel arrangement classification system for steam locomotives and some non-steam locomotives. In Thomas's case, he has 0 unpowered leading wheels, 6 drive wheels, and 0 unpowered trailing wheels, hence 060. In Thomas's case, he'd actually be referred to as an 060T, with the T indicating he's a tank engine. Like all the locomotives and rolling stock in the Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends universe, Thomas is based on a real locomotive. He's based on the LB and SCR Class E2. LB and SCR stands for the London, Brighton, and South Coast Railway. The Class E2s were designed by the LB and SCR's locomotive engineer L.B. Billington to replace the LB and SCR Stroudley E1. The Class E2s were built primarily for shunting duties and short-haul runs. This is typical of tank engines, which aren't capable of carrying enough coal and water for longer distance hauling. There were only 10 Class E2s built, and they were built between June 1913 and October 1916 at the Brighton Works. The first 5 E2s had undersized water tanks, thus the second 5 were built with extended water tanks to increase the water carrying capacity. As you can see here, Thomas is equipped with the extended water tanks. The Class E2s were withdrawn from service between February 1961 and April 1963. The Class E2s were replaced by diesel-powered shunting locomotives, such as the British Rails Class 07. And if you're wondering what a BR Class 07 diesel locomotive looks like, look no further than Salty. While Thomas lives on in the Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends universe, in reality, all 10 Class E2s were scrapped. So how did we do? Did we get everything right? Are there any important facts we missed or got wrong? Leave a comment below. Well, that's going to do it for this installment of Thomas and Friends in 5. We hope this served as a good introduction to Thomas from the Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends universe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next installment of Thomas and Friends in 5.